Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fourth town hall, virtual town hall, as it relates to the surfacing wastewater or surfacing matter at the Bolinas Beach. My name is Lainey Hendricks. I'm the communications director for the county, and it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. I do want to say up front before we dive into our program, those of you that are joining us and might need Spanish interpretation, our Spanish interpreter is running late, and so we will pause and let everyone know when Spanish interpretation is available. Dr. Santora, I don't know if you can maybe convey that in Spanish for me briefly, just to cover the bases.
Hola, me llamo Lisa Santora, la doctora del condado. Ahora mismo nosotros no tenemos el transladora a participar en este programa, pero cuando él o ella llega, vamos a interrumpir y empezar con translación. Gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Santora. With that, I'd like to introduce who we have with us this evening and then dive into our introductory remarks. So joining us from the County of Marin, and at this point, a familiar set of faces. Of course, we have our president of the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Dennis Rodoni, representing District 4. We have Chris Choo, Assistant Director of the Marin County Community Development Agency. We have Sarah Jones, Director of the Marin County Community Development Agency. And we have our Public Health Officer and impromptu interpreter, Dr. Lisa Santora from Marin County Health and Human Services. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to kick things off to Supervisor Dennis Rodoni. Supervisor Rodoni.
Thank you, Lainey, and welcome to everyone tonight. I want to acknowledge the community and reflect on the importance of learning, listening, collaborating, and shared progress as we navigate this challenging situation. The collective efforts highlights a critical lesson that well-informed decisions are made possible by thoughtful collection and application of data, collaboration, and transparency with our communities. Over the past several months, the county has worked to gather data, share information, and engage the community to better understand this public health concern. And tonight, I'm looking forward to hearing more updates related to this issue. So I'll turn it back to you, Lainey. Thank you all.
Thank you, Supervisor Rodoni. I'd now like to go ahead and turn it over to Chris Choo for a status update.
All right, thank you all. My name is Chris Choo. I'm the Assistant Director for Community Development Agency, and I just wanted to provide an update for folks on this call. So I'll start with the most recent update. I'll kind of summarize where we are and going back a little bit, and then pass it on to Dr. Santora. So as many of you know, I think most of you have been on this call before. We have been pursuing tests for the seepage at the Bolinas Bluffs with the regional board. Our last test results, the last round of tests were testing the soil, and it was several samples were collected along the bluffs back in November. And those test samples did come back, and we have those test results now. Those did not show very high levels of bacteria. They were tested for several things, including E. coli, including total coliform, and the levels themselves did not indicate sewage contamination. Because of the levels of those results, those test results, we also, the lab and regional board decided not to pursue additional tests to see if those had the human genetic markers. So we had discussed that in a prior meeting, that these tests might help us further understand if the sewage and if the seepage at the bluffs were actually in fact leaking septic tanks. But we do not have that data from the last round of tests. So going backwards now, we have that round of soil tests that were collected in November. We had a prior set of tests that were collected in late September with the regional board, and those were water samples. Those favored sites where we had more flow. We had to collect a large volume of sample. Those tests were also came back relatively low for many of the E. coli coliform and I believe nitrate. And then that sample was run for the human genetic marker. Those did not have almost any human genetic markers as well. So that is the second round of tests. Prior to that, we had out in the field, this is what kicked all this off, in September, and noticed during a routine inspection that there was seepage. Visually, kind of the physical indicators seemed to signal that it might be wastewater. Some quick lab samples were collected, and those did seem to indicate that this could be wastewater. That's what kicked this off. However, kind of given our last two lab samples, given field visits out to the site, we've noticed changing conditions out there, didn't see the seeps and didn't see quite as much of the visual indicators that this could be wastewater. We have decided to pause kind of on or stop really the emergency aspect of this. I don't know if folks are aware or if it matters much to folks, but the county had kind of had initiated an emergency operations and had kind of a low level emergency to be able to respond to this. And we have stopped that and don't see any indication that this is related to septic systems on the Bolinas Mesa. However, we do know that there are, the parcels on the Big Mesa are all served by individual septic systems. We also know that some of those systems are newer and up to code, and others we do not have very much in the way of permit history or any records for. We also know from having spent the last few months looking at all of this that this has actually surfaced once before in the 80s, and that in the 80s there were quite a bit of additional reports and tests and wells drilled to basically investigate the situation. So given the fact that, in the past we did have some concerns, given that it's come up again, we still want to maintain a connection with the community. We still want to continue to look at what solutions might exist for improving septic systems and partnering with folks like the Bolinas PUD to see how we can move this forward. But for now, the contamination portion of this related to the mesa seems to be a chronic, but not attributable to the septic systems. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Santora to explain kind of the beach side of this as well.
Thank you, Chris. So this indicates the start of a transition. When we visualize visible sewage, which was confirmed with E. coli, as well as flow and discoloration of the soil, by law, we were required to close the beach and to launch an investigation. We were trailblazing in many ways because there's criteria for closing the beach. There was not fixed criteria for reopening the beach, and we engaged both our water boards and the Department of Public Health to get guidance from the state on how to navigate towards beach reopening. That being said, we understand now is we have chronic fecal contamination, and it's not from these human septic systems. It's a diverse environment that's in Bolinas with many mammals that contribute to fecal contamination on the bluffs and in the seepage, and that on any given day within certain dynamics of weather and other conditions, you can have visible seepage and stormwater runoff that can be fecally contaminated, or it can be a dry cliff where there just might be some discoloration. So with that being said, we're working with County Council to shift from a beach closure to a permanent beach advisory, where the community will be given a warning of the public health risk for engaging and interacting with that environment. That's a practice that we have in other beaches in the community, where people are educated and make an informed choice about how they engage with the environment, knowing that there are certain risks at hand. From a public health perspective, the greatest risk is bacterial contamination, or E. coli, where we've had incidents in Marin County that have caused hospitalization, as well as death from exposure to E. coli, and it's something that's significant and why we are engaged in public health through this law, through Health and Safety Code. There's also concern about the ever-changing cliffs. The cliffs themselves are very dynamic, and those conditions do change. We've shared stories where septic tanks haven't fallen off the cliff, so It's just a risky area, but it's also a beautiful, enchanting area. And when we did our site visit, we saw how people were engaging. So our goal is again to shift to a permanent advisory state. We're working on drafts for signage and language to share with the community now with county council. And then we'll be working on a communications campaign. So again, we know there's a lot of visitors. They'll see signs and they'll see us. They'll see signs of advising people of the risks. They'll also see people partaking in recreational activities. And again, just working with our communications team of how can we ensure that residents and visitors alike understand the risk that could be at hand by interacting with nature, which always carries its risks. So I think that, again, I'm really thankful to all the partnerships we had. We worked with so many agencies, which is why we activated our emergency operations center. It's a lot to manage and to track all that's happening. And so I'm just really proud of the partnership between CDA and public health as we work together with our environmental health services, often are working behind the scenes. That's when you don't think about us, is when we're working behind the scenes, but I'm really thankful for that partnership. And with Laney and Communications, we also work with our Office of Emergency Management that just kind of kept us very structured and moving this process forward when we know there have been significant delays, and especially when we're working with a lot of different agencies that all have different domains in this space. So really appreciate everyone's how Supervisor Rodoni started. It really has been a community effort. Truly appreciate people's patience. We know the impact it's had on the lives and well-being. And again, I think we're navigating to a place again where people can re-engage at their own discretion with informed choices in that space. And I'll pause there.
All right. Thank you, Chris and Dr. Lisa. I do want to pause and let folks know that the format of tonight's town hall will be very similar to that of past virtual town halls. There is a function at the base of your screen, whether you're joining by Zoom browser or Zoom Workplace. It says Q&A on it. And using that feature, you should be able to ask our panelists any questions that you may have. So if you do have a burning question, please go ahead and use that Q&A function now and send over those questions, and we'll get those questions into whichever panelist might be most appropriate to respond. So with that, not having any questions just yet, I did want to also offer up, I don't know, not to put her on the spot, but Sarah, I know that you're with us as well. And if there was anything else you wanted to add while we give folks a chance to send over questions.
Sure. I just want to say that we are all very pleased here that that it's going in this direction, and really that we are able to get back to a sense of normalcy in Bolinas, and what something that is really, really important to the community. And so really want to particularly appreciate Dr. Santora right now for kind of understanding how the science and the community issues fit together. So I'm just really pleased that we're going here. We do know that kind of this has been disruptive and it's had a change, and so we're going to keep working with the community around coming back, working with businesses, working with property owners as well.
Excellent. That's great news to hear. Thank you for adding that. And so let's see, first question, and this might be a bit detailed. I think this is probably best for Chris. Can you share the lab reports from your various rounds of sampling? So I don't know for the anonymous attendee who submitted that question, if that is something you want posted online, or if you want a bit more detail shared right now on those lab results. Maybe you can comment again and let us know.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any confidentiality with the lab results, and so I think we can make those available to be posted online. They are very technical, so they do take a bit of adjusting in terms of understanding what they actually say, but certainly I think that can be put up online.
Okay, so we can get those posted to the Bolinas surfacing wastewater webpage. Thank you, Chris. We've got another question that was submitted, saying, we saw yesterday that the cliffs are coming down with each storm. The main white seepage spot had just mud runoff over that spot. So I think it's more of an observation than a question. And that might speak to the erosion concern that I think everybody's brought up not only tonight, but in previous town halls as well. It's just a reality for that area.
Yeah, and that is, something that we're, of course, very aware of, and, an ongoing topic as we have applications for property development, property improvement, or, efforts that property owners are trying to make to address the erosion on their properties. I think that everybody is aware of some of the situations that people have needed to work through in Bolinas, and this is the challenge of our day. I mean, I think that the erosion of the cliffs with those kinds of soils has been something that's been around for a long time, but of course it's increasing. There's the sea level rise, there's the intensity of the storms. We are doing a lot of work here at the county around efforts on resiliency and organizing ourselves to address these kinds of challenges. But I've gone way off the topic of what's happening with a white spot. But you can't separate these things.
And I'll just echo too, I know that we mentioned this in the last virtual town hall, that many of us had the opportunity to take a tour with some of the local residents to kind of show us a bit of what, they know, folks that are very that have been there for a long time, that have different, scientific or otherwise environmental backgrounds, to walk us through the history of the area. And there was at one point, I remember we were just standing there talking, and all of a sudden, there's like literally rocks falling from the bluff. So it's just, whether it's raining or not, erosion is just naturally occurring out there. It's just a reality. All right.
And I'll just add, that's part of our conversation with signage, is just making sure that people are aware of it's enchanting, right? It's such an enchanting space, and people want to go up to the cliffs, and just having appropriate signage that just keep people reminded, right? It's when you're enchanted, you can get caught up in the beauty of that landscape, and just make sure that our signage are not interfering with the beauty, but also just before people enter into that space, that they're just being advised or cautioned on just how to engage with nature more safely. And that's being aware of the cliffs that are above you, and that rocks may be falling. And we see those signs in other environments, and it's just another dynamic space that we can just provide more information to people so they can enjoy that nature as safely as possible.
Agreed.
Can I talk about birds for a second?
Absolutely, please do.
When we talk about fecal contamination, it's a really rich landscape, and that's from the feces itself, and also it's from a lot of different sources, including wild birds that are flying over, the mammals that are out there, from coyotes to deers. We are in the middle of a bird flu outbreak nationwide and statewide, so I'm sure some people are seeing that on the news, and that's just, again, a really important part of the ecosystem out there, is both the birds and the bird feces, and potentially dead birds. And just reminding individuals while they're out there, especially since there are a lot of wild birds, it's the marsh just attracts such amazing beauty, and enchanting themselves watching birds, and probably many bird watchers that are out there. Not to directly handle any birds or dead birds, and to stay away from bird feces, especially now when we're having such widespread transmission. And we are activating the State Emergency Operations Center in response to bird flu. We also know in Bolinas there might be a lot of backyard poultry farmers, so please just read we're all interconnected. All of the animals that live in the space are interconnected. So just a plug to read our status update, because birds are part of the landscape out there too. Thank you for letting me talk about birds.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, I was reading a report from the state recently, the fact that it's gone from poultry to wild birds. And so, that's really alarming, because that really increases that risk of potential disease carry, right? So I think awareness and education is so important. So while it's not exactly beach related, it's definitely
birds fly over the beach.
Exactly. It's a part of our larger ecosystem. And as it relates to protecting the things that we treasure most, which is not only that beautiful beach, but our health and safety. It's definitely perfect. So,
I see that.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I see that we're not getting a lot of questions. And one thing I failed to mention in just kind of providing an update was just, I think a bit of an apology to the community. Like we know that this has been disruptive. We know that this has been quite the effort to kind of work through, waiting for data, waiting for test results. And just wanting to really appreciate that, you all have stuck with us. You're here again on a on a winter night to hear kind of the update, hear what we're doing. And we appreciate that we've had this ability to be able to be open and communicate back and forth around what we know and what we're trying to do based on that. I know it's probably not been as fast as folks have hoped in terms of getting to this point, but I think we needed to be careful. We needed to know as we were moving through this, especially as we learned more, got to know the community better, learned more about the history. I think we just needed to be very careful about how we approached this process. I do also just want to echo, Dr. Santora just mentioned some of the various folks that we've partnered with, but one local partner has definitely been the Bolinas Public Utility District, and they've just been instrumental in helping us really understand what's happening locally, going out there and checking on things. And I'm really happy that, we have developed a much stronger relationship in terms of kind of looking at the larger, this is not a Bolinas issue, but just a larger kind of West Marin issue around septic systems and how we might be able to address and improve those. And so, just working with staff at Bolinas PUD and trying to commit to figuring out how we can try and address this for, because we do know one way or another that some of those systems probably do need repair. And so looking at what the alternatives might look like, how we might be able to approach that has definitely been one outcome of this entire process. So just wanted to make sure to say that before people start dropping off in case they do.
I really appreciate you lifting that up, Chris. I think that's important to certainly put out there for the community to hear, whether they're here tonight or maybe they watch the recording later on in the week. So that's great. I trying to think back of the virtual town halls that we've held over the last few months and some of the burning questions that came up during those. I'm sure we may get if members of our surfing community were here, they would ask, can you clarify again kind of what the transition from closure to advisory may mean in terms of access, and what are we asking people to do in terms of exercising caution, what should they stay away from, and all of that good stuff, just so we can start to better educate folks about what this in light of test results, this movement from closure to advisory means for them.
So one, I just think to be aware of your surroundings. So first, just focusing on the erosion and the cliffs and just that dynamic nature from a safety perspective. Two, the awareness that the bluff water most likely at any given time will contain E. coli. So our biggest concern would of course be with younger children who might be playing in tide pools or water, especially the closer to the cliff. Like the closer you are to the cliff and run off the seepage, then the higher likelihood that there could be potentially contaminated. Could change on any given day. We know that's just a very dynamic. So don't want there's days that there might be low levels of low to non-detectable levels of fecal contamination in that seepage that runs off. And there's days, especially in those post-storm days, that it could be really high. So if people are engaging in nature, just make sure that they're after they're washing their hands and just those best practices. And really try it. And we know a lot of surfers know this. We've mentioned this before. It's after those stormwaters is when that runoff is happening and the higher likelihood of just the wash off. It's a cleaning, but it brings it down into the waters themselves. And oftentimes surfers will anecdotally report that they're more likely to get sick after those rain events, because that's when the water is running off at such quick a pace, is picking up E. coli and just bringing it down. And it's usually we'll see for a few days, and especially in our more traffic beaches throughout the state, in LA and San Diego, we'll see beaches closed for a few days after those rainy days. So again, just really exercising caution, always wash your hands. I don't think people wash their hands enough. That's my perspective. My kids think my favorite word is gel, because if they touch their face, they have to use gel. So highly encourage people, if they're going to walk, just to have hand gel on hand, because we know there's not running water and soap nearby. And again, just and enjoy I mean, again, also enjoy the beach. We know it's a gift to have such beautiful nature. But just to now engage with it with aware, we know, and we all are aware now that it's an area of chronic fecal contamination, primarily probably due to the other mammals that are out there. Oh, and lastly, pet waste, huge contributor to E. coli levels on that cliff. You can't control it. You can't pick up after coyotes, although you might want to if you see that. You can't pick up after all the wildlife, but if you have your dog on the beach, really should curb the dogs. That's why many beaches don't allow dogs, is because on dog heavy beaches, their fecal matter also contains E. coli. So the best thing you can do just to keep our beaches safer is by curbing your dog and making sure you have bags to pick that up, and always and be a good neighbor and pick up other dogs matter poop when you see it. And I think that the only outstanding question that I would probably have is just, I know that's an ongoing conversation just around the trash. We know that was an issue with people actually, having, and that might not have been resolved yet, is just having adequate trash removal and locations on that site. So that was probably one of the questions that were out there that I've heard asked previously, and I don't know the answer to myself.
That's great. Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Lisa, on, access, and then also kind of the do's and don'ts of enjoying Bolinas Beach. So that I think is really helpful. We did have another, I think it's a comment more than a question, comment come in from an attendee saying, FYI, last week before the last storm, there were a lot of red tide days. I'm going to defer to Community Development Agency. I hate to admit I'm naive. I don't know what red tide day means. But that is something that one of our attendees shared in the Q&A.
And
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, and Dr. Santora, you may want to jump in here as well, but I'm actually not aware that we had red tide dates in the lagoon or in the ocean. So I'm not sure about the location, but it is somewhat common to have kind of that first flush, and during these big storm events, having surface, basically land water runoff and create contaminated conditions in some of the near kind of shoreline water bodies. I'm not sure if there are other conditions right now. I know that traditionally some of the ocean water temperatures contribute and can make for additional red tide events, but I don't know, Dr. Santora, do you know more about that on the Marin coast right now?
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that one. Usually we usually see them seasonally, again, because of changing ocean water temperatures, and it's the phytoplankton that just changes color. We are notified. There is a statewide system for notifying us of harmful algal blooms. And so sometimes you'll see those notices come up from, again, our partners in environmental health when we receive those notices from the state. And again, just another, and it's just another threat that we share information on so people can avoid swimming in those areas. And actually with those, it's not really people swimming. Often we're more concerned about pets. When there's an algal bloom, it's a lot of times pets would be going into some of those bodies of water. So that's where most of us don't swim in some of the places where we see the algal blooms, but our pets might. So
good point. Definitely. All right. So in light of this kind of changing conditions, or not changing conditions, but new information with the test results leading to us moving the beach from a closure to advisory, are there any other changes that have occurred because of this? And I know I see kind of Chris, you gave me a nod, so I don't know if there's anything you want to speak to on that.
Yeah, just one other note is for those who live in Bolinas, at the start of this, we posted a disclosure memo for anyone doing construction in Bolinas, letting folks know, because of the uncertainty of kind of the source of the possible seepage and the contaminants, we wanted to let folks know that if they're doing work around their septic systems, conditions might change. We have removed the disclosure memo, which basically just alerted folks to what we had discovered and that there may be, we may be taking different actions, and we just didn't know at the time. We have eliminated that disclosure memo from our public permit counter and CDA. And if it's not removed from the website, it should be removed from the website fairly soon. We certainly made the request. So that was kind of we never had a moratorium in this round of testing or sampling, but we did have that disclosure memo, and that is being taken down from both the public counter as well as the website.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. As I think back of other town halls that we've had and some of the popular topics that come up, you know, I also think about, and I know this was acknowledged in earlier comments about, you know, the effect this has had, or at least the temporary closure had on businesses in Bolinas. I'm wondering if anything could be addressed in terms of what the county might be doing with regard to supporting businesses or supporting the idea of boosting economic vitality in the community. Right.
Yes, we have. So our economic vitality coordinator is, you know, is heavily involved in this community at this point as a result of this. I
She is
don't.
also in the audience.
And she is in the audience. I wasn't gonna call her out, but Raisa De La Rosa is here on the call. I think that we are, you know, still evolving what kinds of specific measures might be taken. I also understand that there's been some positive developments around the post office question, or potential positive developments around the post office question, which we heard from community members has kind of been a 1-2 punch around these situations. So we have some more work to do on what kind of you know, what kind of community-wide efforts might be useful for the specific challenges that the businesses there have been facing in these months.
All right, thank you for that. And Raisa, if I don't want to call her out, if she does have something to add, Raisa, if you raise your hand, we'll be happy to give you that panelist intro, but we do appreciate you joining us on your commute home. All right, any other thoughts to add? I'm checking the Q&A. I'm not seeing anything else come in. So as we kind of round up this virtual town hall, any other key points that you feel might be worth either reinforcing, or something you think maybe you forgot to mention earlier on before we close up this evening? Okay. Well, I mean, I don't have to search for words.
Merry
You don't have
Christmas.
to.
Is
No,
that?
Yes, we do want to certainly wish everyone a happy a holiday for sure. And I'm really looking forward to working alongside, and I'll just add on to that last comment, working alongside Raisa as it relates to how we can creatively promote folks utilizing not just Bolinas, but all the wonderful businesses in West Marin, up and down West Marin, whether it be restaurants or merchants or service providers. So more to come on that. So with that, I do want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I realize it was a bit smaller of a crowd this evening, but we're really thankful that you did take the time to tune in and hear this update. And I also want to thank our panelists, Chris Choo, Sarah Jones, Supervisor Dennis Rodoni, Dr. Lisa Santora, and Raisa, thank you again for being there as well.
Just sorry, Lainey, just one thing. I guess, do we have any information for people about future engagement going forward? I mean, you know, we had been communicating kind of on this regular basis, holding these town halls at this kind of frequency during this time. I'm not sure that there's not you know, there's not much call to do this specific format, but I think we really do expect that this is not the last time people have to see us, because we want to engage around this around these business questions. And so maybe TBD when and what that looks like, and whether this is, you know, going to be a time to get together in person. But you know, I just want to kind of put that out there, what the next steps might be.
No, I think that's great. And you can't see my notes on my screen, so you don't know what's coming up, but thank you for hitting on a couple of those bullets. You're a rock star. So yeah, so I was going to close out and just say by, because it's of the changing nature, we probably will not be having another virtual town hall in just a couple of weeks as we had been doing. However, to Sarah's really well said point, this isn't the last that you're going to hear from us on this issue. In fact, we want to keep this conversation going. As was said, now I'm not remembering if it was Dr. Santora or Chris or Sarah or whom, but we do want to stress that we're really committed to continuing this collaboration and dialogue around supporting the community, not only in the important work with local businesses on economic vitality and resiliency planning, but also continue conversations with our great partner at Bolinas Community Public Utility District to really investigate, potential wastewater treatment improvements that could occur there in Bolinas. And so from the start, you'll recall that we mentioned that a lot of this involves the community. It has to, it needs to be a team approach, not just the county coming in and saying, you will do this. And so we want to hold true to that. So that web page that we have been promoting since the start, the marincounty.gov/Bolinas-wastewater, that will remain live. If you go to it this moment, it still does have the closure information, but by tomorrow we should have it updated with the advisory information that we spoke of earlier this evening, an updated FAQ that reflects some of these changes, as well as the recent test results from the Regional Water Quality Board, and other information that would be helpful to you as it relates to this ongoing concern and focus area. We do have our email subscriber list that many of you have signed up for. Thank you. We will continue to utilize that as well. So as we have updates, whether it's another virtual town hall or perhaps an in-person opportunity to connect on this, we'll certainly leverage that as well. I think we're up to over 300 people subscribed to that. So we find that as a rich resource to connect folks as well. And we're always open to your feedback if there are other ways or other opportunities for all of us to come to the table on this. So does that kind of hit on what you were looking at, Sarah? Perfect. That's great. Okay, well then with that, I again wanted to thank our panelists. I also want to give a silent shout out to the wonderful tech team that is helping to host this town hall. We appreciate your time and effort to make us look really, really good. And to just close out, I want to again thank the Bolinas community for hanging with us, for your patience and your cooperation through this. I think as a county organization, we've learned a lot through this experience, both in how we respond to events similar to this, but also in how we make decisions together, that delicate balance of the local needs combined with our responsibility to have to enforce state and municipal codes. So thank you for being a great partner through this, and we look forward to continuing this work together in the days, weeks, months ahead. So with that, happy holidays, everyone. And we look forward to connecting with you all again soon. Take care and have a good night.